Now, joining me today to actually discuss more on this topic is author, scientist, commentator, chief scientist officer. He's an epidemiologist, actually, and he is with the McCullough Foundation. That's Nicolas Hulscher. Nicolas, thank you so much for joining me today as we discuss this very important topic.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Now, I just showed you a video there of two devastated parents. They've lost their child, and this is because of this, COVID-19 vaccine. I've always said that I've followed all your findings that you've released as the McCullough Foundation. Very informative, and I wish everybody in the world could actually see what's really going on. But let me just start off by asking, how does the infant vaccination program actually run in the United States?
Yeah, the infant vaccination program is absolutely disastrous. As of 2024, infants, so those age 0, so when they're born, up until 2 years old, actually receive up to 32 doses of an injection. That includes the COVID-19 mRNA shots and influenza vaccines. But that is a large number of toxic loads to administer to young children who are just beginning their development process. And so it's absolutely terrible here in America. A vast majority, if not all, of the childhood vaccines were not properly tested against placebo controls. So we do not really know any of the total safety profile. So basically what we're doing is we are injecting ingredients that were never tested properly in children directly into their veins. And this is likely resulting in this skyrocketing neuropsychiatric chronic disease epidemic we see with autism here in America, with 1 in 31 children now diagnosed with autism.
Wow, that's a huge number. And even though we have these stats at hand, the government still overlooks the fact that the vaccination program probably needs to be stopped. I mean, we just watched Dr. McCullough there really stating it out clearly that these were never vaccines. It was never supposed to be administered in any human being to begin with.
Yeah, these COVID-19 mRNA shots should never have been administered to anybody, right? I mean, they've been testing this mRNA platform for actually decades, and it's killed the vast majority of animals that they have injected it with. And so this should never have went into a human arm based on their testing in the past decades. And so, unfortunately, they didn't care, and they went ahead with injecting over 70% of the world's population with these genetic gene transfer technology, or gene therapy, in other words. These are not vaccines. And so just think of that, to 70% of the population, not properly tested. In fact, they didn't know any of the long-term side effects. Gene therapy takes about 5 to 15 years to know the true safety profile. So we're just learning, we're just reaching the tip of the iceberg here of these harms that we're discovering.
And this is how the world woke up to a vaccine literally overnight, and you're saying it takes up to about 15 years. So what exactly happens to one's body once you're administered with these vaccines?
So we'll visualize this. So first, right, it goes into the arm. The public health authorities claimed it stayed there. It doesn't, not at all. In fact, all of the animal biodistribution studies we have indicate it goes into every single organ system, including vital organ systems like the brain and the heart. And this is now confirmed in human autopsy studies. So when somebody dies from an mRNA injection, they find vaccine mRNA and the produced spike protein in the affected tissues. And so a study by Ota and colleagues found this vaccine mRNA and spike in the brains of hemorrhagic stroke patients 17 months after last injection. Crossan and colleagues found the mRNA directly in the cardiac tissue in deceased mRNA injection recipients. And Bohmeyer and colleagues found the spike protein directly in the heart of these individuals. And we're actually working on a few case reports now of individuals that died after injection, and they found spike and mRNA in every single organ system, including the SV40 promoter enhancer sequence, So now we are actually concerned that this could most definitely, in some individuals, be reverse transcribing into the genome. What this means is it could possibly integrate into your own DNA, and you will become a forever spike production factory. That's unfortunately where the evidence is pointing right now. We need more studies, and unfortunately, they're not doing them.
Oh, wow. I like the way you put it. You become a spike protein a factory. So you speak about autopsy. There was something I was reading about one of the findings that you came up with the autopsy. Do you actually have data on the autopsy death findings? I mean, hundreds of autopsies actually confirm what you just said, the causal link between the COVID-19 vaccine and the death. What stats are we looking at here? Because I know we have been speaking about millions of people surpassing World War I, World War II. And I think you even said Vietnam put together. People are dying. What is the data that we're looking at here?
Yeah, well, regarding autopsies, so I just went over a few of them, but I'll go over our autopsy study here at the McCullough Foundation. It's called a systematic review of autopsy findings in deaths after COVID-19 vaccination. We actually found 325 autopsies that were published in the peer-reviewed literature. We collected all of them, put them in a 50-page evidence table with all the autopsy findings. And we actually found, through review with pathology experts, that actually 73.9% of these deaths were due to COVID-19 vaccination. And we concluded that there is a causal link between COVID-19 vaccination and death. And what that means is the FDA has failed to do their duty of initiating what's called a Class 1 recall when products cause fatalities or at least increase your risk of death. They have failed to do that. Our study indicates it's long overdue. They need a black box warning for death, these mRNA products. They still haven't done it. And regarding these death estimates, this is now actually conservative, right? So a conservative, or at least American death toll is about 470,000 American casualties up to 600,000. This is based on two independent estimates. The most recent estimate is a study by Florida Surgeon General Joe Ladapo and MIT collaboration. They found that Pfizer increases your risk of death 36% more than if you received a Moderna injection. Wow. So what that means is if you extrapolate that to the U.S., those who received Pfizer, or in other words, Pfizer alone in America likely killed at least 470,000 Americans just based on that study with 1 million people in it. So the numbers are staggering. We have reached World War I, World War II, Vietnam War casualty levels here, American Civil War casualties, and they're still on the market. They're still being given to people. But we got to get away from this.
What's the reason for keeping them on the market with all this data and evidence that has been produced time without number? Different doctors, different scientists alike have come to present the stats. What could be the main reason why this is being overlooked?
This is being overlooked because, unfortunately, a lot, and I mean a lot of people within our regulatory agencies, within our governments, including governors, have heavily promoted and were instrumental in the rollout of these mRNA injections, and they were instrumental in administering them to people through the policies they made. They will not backtrack because would not be able to accept psychologically in their head that what they've done has resulted in mass casualties rivaling the levels of wars, of global wars. And so it's a psychological defense mechanism, but also a lot of them are unfortunately compromised. They are receiving large sums of money from the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah. But we have to acknowledge the single most unacknowledged mass casualty event, the COVID-19 vaccination campaign.
Wow. Those are truly very disturbing numbers. Now, in the recent news that we've received, President Biden is said to be suffering from cancer. Now, I really got very interested there. I said, cancer? What kind of cancer is this? And why do we seem to be receiving the news as though it's a surprise? Is it really a surprise? And what kind of cancer? Is there a legitimate reason, rather, to suggest that former President Joe Biden actually received the mRNA COVID jabs? And is this why his cancer is actually a turbo cancer?
Right, well, so I guess we won't really know if he received saline injections or the real mRNA shots. Now, knowing how they kind of wanted to get rid of him, at the end of his term there, it wouldn't surprise me that they gave him the real thing. But if he did get the real thing, he would have gotten 6 Pfizer mRNA booster injections.
6?
Right, so 6 doses total. We documented that by looking at all of his public events. And so if he did indeed get 6 mRNA boosters, that is actually increasing his risk of death from cancer by 300%, and that's according to a recent study that is in the preprint server currently. But that study actually found if you get over 3 mRNA booster injections compared to none, you not only have a 300% increased risk of death, but your survival time is cut in half. So if he truly did get these Pfizer shots, it's not unexpected that it would have accelerated any cancer activity that was in his body already.
Okay, can I just veer off a little there? We had the Pope, who obviously was laid to rest just, I think, last month. And we raised questions as to what could have possibly caused the Pope's death. Now, the Pope is said to have died of a heart attack. What causes a heart attack?
Well, what does cause a heart attack is mRNA injectable products, unfortunately.
There we go.
Now, I'm not sure how many doses the Pope got or if he did get any doses, but I do know that the mRNA injections can cause heart attacks. In fact, the second largest COVID-19 vaccine safety study ever conducted, with 85 million people in this study, they actually found about 300% increased risks of myocardial infarction or heart attack after dose 2 of an mRNA injection.
Oh, wow. That's really sad, because I just say to myself, it seems like there's still a lot of deceit that goes in without even letting us know what exactly is causing people to die. But then thank God for people like you that obviously give up the knowledge, and somehow we can add the 2 and 2 together and then ask questions as to what's happening. Now, the FDA unveiled a new plan to limit the COVID-19 vaccine. Does that change anything?
It changes a bit, and I'll explain what happened here and why we're not super impressed with this at all. In fact, many people are quite angry at this new plan. And so what's good about this plan is that for healthy 6-month-olds to, I believe, 50-year-olds, further approval of COVID vaccines for that group will require proper randomized placebo-controlled trials. Now, what this plan does, unfortunately, is it allows approval of COVID vaccines without these randomized placebo-controlled trials for what they claim are high-risk groups, which include high-risk infants that are 6 months old, and they also include pregnant women. So they label pregnant women as high risk. So they still do have this plan, which includes administering mRNA injections to pregnant women and, unfortunately, to what they claim are high-risk infants. And they're not indicating at all that they are going to remove these from the market, which they should have been removed many, many years ago after the massive death toll has continued to mount, and Americans have been continuously harmed, injured, permanently disabled, left without any help. Nobody's researching to help these guys except, honestly, the McCullough Foundation and a few other foundations. Government's not doing a thing. So if they really want to continue harming people and resulting in death with these mRNA shots, they really got to pull them off the market. They really got to pull them off the market.
I totally agree with you. I don't know what more people have to do or say, but there has to be an immediate stop and an immediate ban. But here's the interesting thing. Just a few days ago, the pandemic treaty was adopted. What's your take on that?
Yes, the pandemic treaty was adopted for the World Health Organization
Yeah.
member states. And so what this does is what I call it, it brings in a new world health order, right? Instead of a new world order, they are now bringing in these sweeping health mandates, these global health mandates. They're trying to centralize control for what they say is going to be a next pandemic. And so this is going to accelerate the approval of fast-tracked experimental countermeasures, including most likely these self-amplifying mRNA injections. And it does promote the use of mass surveillance systems and vaccine passport systems. And so this is a disaster. Thankfully, the U.S. is in the process of withdrawing from this organization.
Yeah.
But I do feel bad for other countries. You know, everybody, all the other countries out there, you should get out before something happens.
Honestly, like, just come out of it. What does it take? Come out of it. Now, I would love for you if you can clarify this. Have we ever had any vaccines that were ever helpful? Or vaccines in general were never good? I'll tell you why I'm asking. We had polio in Nigeria, but polio came after the polio vaccines were introduced. We had the dengue fever in Brazil, but also there was some vaccination program that was introduced there, and all of a sudden we saw a rise, a spike in dengue fever. Likewise with the COVID-19. It seemed like just an ordinary flu from what they told us, but people started dropping dead after getting the vaccine jab. I could go on. The same happened in India. The same happened in Kenya. So is there any vaccine that was ever, were vaccines ever meant to be in a human body?
Vaccines, I believe, whenever you have synthetic laboratory-made things, you know, in an injectable product or oral product, you know, it's not meant to be in the human body. You know, the body isn't built to uptake large amounts of aluminum, large amounts of these modified proteins. Just think, when you inject something that is inherently toxic to the human body, it's not going to make you healthier, right? And that's what they always claim. They say, oh, vaccines, they're healthy. You know, go get healthy. Go get your flu shot. It's impossible to make you healthier because you're injecting toxins, right? And so, you know, if they really wanted to make a good vaccine, first of all, it shouldn't be injectable. Second of all, there should be no toxic ingredients, and it shouldn't cause any immune dysregulation. And so, but all the vaccines now in the past, almost none of them have been properly tested against a placebo. So we can't say that really any of them have been safe.
So should we even still have a vaccine system? Like, for example, should people even bother themselves with a flu vaccine? Or should we just completely abandon the vaccine system in the health fraternity?
It appears that the vaccine system, well, first of all, the population has lost complete trust in the system, rightfully so.
Absolutely.
And people don't want to be vaccinating their kids anymore. They don't want to be injecting 32 doses of, they don't even know what's inside of them. And so as we move forward, I think we're going to see less and less and less vaccines. And we're also going to see, as less vaccines are administered, we're going to see a drastic improvement in this autism epidemic. I think that'll start to reverse in this chronic disease epidemic as less kids are being injected with toxic chemicals. And so I think we're in a good trajectory at this point, at least here in America, but it's going to be a long journey.
So something that I also found very interesting at the time when the vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines were actually introduced. We had vaccines that were specifically for Africa, and then we had vaccines that were specifically for Europe. Why was it done like that? What was the difference? Because I asked myself that. So if COVID is in Africa, it's a different COVID than what it would be in the United States and in Europe, or COVID is COVID. What was the reason or the purpose of having a vaccine specially made for Africa?
I think a lot of this had to do with trade, right? Some companies signed with certain countries, some companies. So, like, take for example, in America, we didn't allow AstraZeneca vaccines. We never had them. But I know all of Europe had AstraZeneca vaccines. You know, we had Pfizer and Moderna. China didn't have any of those. I believe China had Sinovac, an inactivated virus one. And so, yeah, we had all these different platforms in all these different countries. You know, I don't know the true answer to why. It could be because of, you know, they decided, oh, we want that for our population. But knowing that America is had one of the most corrupt pharmaceutical industries, most corrupt regulatory agencies in the world, it was no surprise that countries like the United States, like Western countries in Europe, did introduce these mRNA shots because, unfortunately, they didn't care about the health of their populations.
Wow. Okay, so the Lyme disease and COVID-19, do they originate from the same laboratory?
I'm not sure about if it's the same exact laboratory. I'm not sure on that, but I do know that at least SARS-CoV-2 indeed did come from a laboratory, and it could have been contributed to by UNC Chapel Hill here in America, right? Everybody pays attention to the Wuhan lab. Nobody really looks at UNC Chapel Hill with Ralph Barrick's lab here, where there's actually been about 19, or less than 19, maybe 9 laboratory-acquired infections at this facility in early 2020. So we had multiple laboratories worldwide that were operating on these viruses.
So, but the Lyme disease was also another scam, right?
Yeah, I have heard things that also did result from laboratory activities as well. And honestly, a lot of these viruses, a lot of these bacteria could most definitely be the result of lab activities. You know, but unfortunately, we won't know the definitive answer to that. But what we do know is that there's been about 300 lab leaks since 2001 worldwide, at least 300 confirmed lab leaks of various pathogens. And so, you know, it's not surprising that many of these do come from laboratories.
Very interesting. Now, let me read something here that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. actually says. He speaks about Bill Gates as an enemy of humanity and he must be stopped. I absolutely agree with him. Now, he says that. These are his remarks, actually, from the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., making headlines and sparking widespread conversation even before his official appointment. But in a recent statement, Kennedy actually said, and I quote, "Bill Gates is an enemy of humanity, and he must be stopped." The comment has ignited heated debate across political and, of course, the public health communities as Kennedy continues to speak out against deeply troubling agendas behind the pharmaceutical industry, one of them being eugenics, right? The global vaccine campaigns, the growing influence of tech billionaires in international health policy. So with Bill Gates and, of course, at the forefront of these initiatives, they moved from talking about population reduction to mass experimentation under the guise of philanthropy. Now, let's just quickly watch what he says, and then I'll come back there with some questions with regards to that.
Was about Gates, you know, because I've written a book about him, and that what he calls philanthrocapitalism, which is you use philanthropy to make yourself rich, and you use it strategically, and that's what he's done again and again. He's gotten control of the World Health Organization so that they mandate vaccines all over the world, and the companies that make those vaccines are Gates is, in many of them, the major shareholder. And he did the same thing with the Green Revolution. He got a hold of the regulatory agencies in African countries and forced them to take to change the nature of agriculture. You know, there's 20,000 generations of agriculture of people growing crops like sorghum and plantains and yucca and all these plants for subsistence. And he said, no, we're going to transfer them all to these, GMO monocultures of corn, and then we're going to bring in companies that he owns, Kraft, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, these big food companies, processing companies, to buy that, and that's going to be the deal. And then, of course, during COVID, all of that shut down, and you had, there's 30 million Africans now as a direct result of Gates's policy who are now on the edge of starvation.
Tell that story that you shared with me a couple of years ago about the vaccines that...
Okay, so now let me start off by asking Nicolas, this issue of philanthropy. I think this has been one of the world's greatest scams as well. We had USAID, literally, it turned out to be like a terrorism, that's how I would call it, a terrorism arm of these deep staters pushing out their agenda. Now we have this Bill Gates, we have so many others, and they're coming out as philanthropy, but actually sponsoring vaccines and the death of people. What is your take with this issue when it comes to philanthropy? Is it really still philanthropy, or should we call it something else?
Yeah, philanthropy became something that people would hide behind since, I believe, the 1900s. I believe it started with John D. Rockefeller. They got such bad press, and they're like, well, why don't we just hide? Why don't we just stay with philanthropists now, right? Give some money away here and there, and act like the heroes. And so that's what they do, right? They hide behind philanthropy. But in reality, if you really look and see at the activities they're doing, particularly the Gates Foundation, it's very worrisome, right? So let's get this straight. The Gates Foundation in 2021 funded a study. It's published in The Lancet. They found irreversible population collapse
Wow.
by 2050 in 75% of countries. So that means, right, basically the end of civilization, that can't be reversed. That's what they forecast in their study. The same Bill Gates, the same Gates Foundation was instrumental in manufacturing, funding, and distributing mRNA shots, right? They wanted to inject the whole world with it. Bill Gates said that in an interview. So you have those two things. And then you have new study that just came out that shows that mRNA shots actually destroy 60% of primordial follicles in female rats.
Oh.
That's the finite egg supply in women. It doesn't regenerate. And so we now know these mRNA shots are detrimental to that finite egg supply, essential for fertility. And it corroborates a human study that shows 33% reduction in successful conception rates among vaccinated women compared to unvaccinated women. So knowing that these injections destroy fertility, and while he funded them and wanted to inject people at the same time, raises serious concerns about population control operations.
Yeah. Wow. Philanthropy, very interesting. Now, this HHS secretary actually has alluded to a potential link between cell phone use and cancer due to the electromagnetic fields. What's your opinion on this? Is there enough scientific evidence to actually support that the EMF from cell phones poses a significant cancer risk, and should the public be concerned? I'll also add on something there. I just found out from a piece of news that they even want to lower so much so the prices for cell phones, so that everybody can afford a cell phone. And I thought to myself, is it because it's yet again another philanthropy trick just to get to, people's health and then destroy people's health? But I would like to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, cell phones are absolutely detrimental to human health. We now know in large systematic reviews, and what a systematic review is when they collect all of the studies published in a certain period of time. We now know in a few recent ones that, yes, cell phone radiation is carcinogenic, particularly when you're overexposed to it. So if you hold your cell phone up to your head on a phone call for long periods of time and you continue to do it, you are at a higher risk of these brain tumors. So we do know that it can be carcinogenic. But what I'm most concerned about, as well with cell phones, is a recent study came out, and they found that if an iPhone, right, an iPhone, if you hold it up, if it's up against your body, right, for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, so it's in your pocket, it clumps up your blood. What's called blood aggregation, right? So it makes your blood actually flow less efficiently in your body in just 5 minutes, and they verified that with ultrasound techniques. So you do not, you know, think twice when you leave your cell phone in your pocket for long periods of time.
Oh my goodness. Do you know how many people are walking around with their cell phones in their pocket? Do you know how many people love the iPhone, so to speak? I really hope they can hear you loud and clear. That means we've got millions and millions of people that probably are suffering and they don't even know health-wise. Wow. So here's the question. We've now known and established that these COVID-19 vaccines in general actually, but specifically making reference to the COVID-19 vaccines, are poison, period. It's poison, it kills people. We literally have a vaccine holocaust. Is there any chance that it can completely come out of your body?
Unfortunately, at this point in time, if the mRNA does indeed reverse transcribe into your cells, we don't think at this point in time there will be a way anytime soon to remove that or reverse that from the body. We are currently collaborating with a company called Neo7 Bioscience, and you know, they're trying to actually find ways to reverse this damage, you know, to counteract that possible reverse transcription and damage from this mRNA. There are a few things we can do to address the spike protein, including McCullough protocol-based spike detoxification, which is 3 enzymes, nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. These 3 have shown promise at directly degrading spike protein when it's tested, when it's exposed to it in the laboratory. And we do need human studies to further confirm its efficacy in humans. But right now, that's what we're using to address the produced spike protein that your body produces, as well as vitamin D, which is absolutely critical in addressing COVID vaccine injury syndromes. If you have low vitamin D, you are at a higher risk of death from COVID vaccine-induced myocarditis.
Wow. This is really one of the biggest crimes ever committed against humanity in history. Now, Nicolas, just my final question for you tonight. Are we going to have a zombie apocalypse because of these vaccines?
I don't think it'll go that far, you know. We do know that the mRNA shots do induce, they are associated with 86 neuropsychiatric adverse events. A recent study by Dr. Jim Thorpe found that. And so we do know that it can induce, or it's been associated with schizophrenia, with psychosis, with depression, with Alzheimer's, with dementia. Multiple studies now confirm this sort of brain damage and neuropsychiatric damage. So it can result in behavioral changes, but I don't think it's going to go as far as becoming a zombie.
Wow. Nicolas, thank you so much for joining me tonight on the program. Like I say to you again, and I say it, I am absolutely loving all the information that you've been giving out. It's very educative. And I think people should actually perhaps maybe follow you to find out more about what is happening with this whole COVID-19 agenda. It's evil. It's evil. I don't know how to even not say it this way, but it's evil. People are dying. And the people that got the COVID-19, in fact, let this be my last question, actually. The people that got the COVID-19, whether it was 1 jab, 2 jabs, whatever the case may be, I heard that in some instances it actually goes up to the 14 jabs per person. Having so many jabs in your body, then what happens? Is it a given that you would die? I'm sorry to ask such a horrible question, but it's really a big concern.
14 jabs with an mRNA shot, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have 14 jabs, it's almost a given, based on the evidence that we have, that you are significantly reducing your life expectancy and causing tremendous damage to various organ systems.
What if you had 2?
If you have two, you definitely have a chance to be free and clear because of batch variability. A large portion of people actually received dud batches associated with no adverse events. The mRNA could have very well been degraded in these batches and they will not suffer any adverse events. But then you have about 20% of the population got what's called high risk batches associated with a large number of adverse events and death.
Yeah.
So if you want to check your badge, go to howbadismybadge.org.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that information. Nicolas Hulscher, thank you for joining me once again on my program. It's always good to have you on the show to help us dissect this very, very important topic.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So that was Nicolas Hulscher. He's with the McCullough Foundation and epidemiologist. He's been doing so much research and author. He writes a lot of very interesting materials that I honestly would encourage you to actually go on his X page and just see what they're churning out there in terms of at least trying to keep yourself healthy. You know, you have to try and keep yourself healthy. Have you been jabbed? Maybe you have. Maybe you've received the COVID mRNA vaccine. Is there hope? Absolutely, yes, there is hope. But don't go back again and get that vaccine again. Don't do that. You know, don't do that. There's nothing that proves that it will help you with your health. You really don't need it. Whether it's for a flu, whether it's for malaria, whether it's for HIV, whatever the case may be, just don't go and get any vaccine. But that's all I have time for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow as I continue to give you more updates. It's goodbye for now.